Bristol Community College, Mathematics with Dan Avedikian, Math 131, Elements of College Mathematics, Section 2.2, Problem 29. This is Section 2.2, Problem 29. It says use row operations to change the 0.4 in the matrix below into a 0. So right here we have a 0.4. We want to make it a 0. Now what makes this one a little weird is we have a decimal. But it's really the same process. So we're going to write an equation that will make that 0 out. It's going to change some of the rest of the row. And we're going to create the equation using the same process as the previous problem. So our equation will begin with row 2 because that's the row where we want to make a 0. We want to make a 0 in row 2. Our equation must begin with row 2. So we're going to have row 2 equals some stuff plus the old row 2. So I initially say stuff, I leave a blank spot. I'll come back, I'll fill that in a minute. But whatever row your equation begins in, it must also end in. This particular problem, we begin in row 2, so we must end in row 2. Now, what I initially call stuff, let's go back and put that in. The stuff is the row with the 1 in the same column. So I'm in the third column over. In that column, I have a 1. It's in row 3. So my stuff has a row 3 in it. And it is multiplied times the number that's being zeroed, but with the opposite sign. So I will have a negative 0.4. So my equation is, I'm making a new row 2, which is equal to negative 0.4 times row 3 plus the old row 2. Again, my equation begins with the row where I want to make the 0, ends with the same row. I have some stuff in the middle, which is the row with the 1 in the same column, multiplied times the number I'm zeroing, but with the opposite sign. One's positive, one's negative. Once I have the equation, I believe the rest is easier. It's more difficult to come up with the equation than it is to do the math in the equation. Even when it has this decimal won't slow us down that much. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's make our next matrix. I'm making a new row 2, so row 1 won't change. It's 1, 0, 0, 10. It will just stay 1, 0, 0, 10. Now, I am making a new row 2. That's going to change. So I have negative 0.4 times row 3. So negative 0.4 times 0. And I'm going to add to row 2. So I make a 0 and I multiply, add another 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. Now the next position, negative 0.4 times row 3. So I have negative 0.4 times 0. Again, I make a 0. Add that result of 0 plus row 2. So row 2, 0 plus row 2 is 0 plus 1. The 1 stays. The first couple of positions stay. The next position is also easy. So I have negative 0.4 times row 3. So negative 0.4 times 1 is negative 0.4. Add to row 2. So I'm going to add negative 0.4 plus positive 0.4. So negative 0.4, positive 0.4, 0. Now the last one, we do have to do a little bit of work. So negative 0.4 times row 3 is times 20. I'm going to get an answer for that, and I'm going to add it back up to row 2, which is plus 6. Why don't we do that off to the side? So negative 0.4 times row 3. So row 3 in this last column is a 20. Now you might want to do this on your calculator. So negative 0.4 times 20 will be negative 8. So I really just think of 4 times 20, or you can just use this 0 to bring the decimal over. I know it's 4 times 2, and I adjust for the decimal and the 0. Don't forget it's negative. However you do it, I would recommend using a calculator. You get an answer when you multiply of minus 8. Now you're going to still have to take that minus 8 and add it to row 2. So you multiply, you get minus 8, which you can get with your calculator. Add minus 8 and minus 6. Minus 8 and minus 6 is minus 14. So my new row 2 is finished. Row 3 doesn't have to change, so it can stay 0, 0, 1, 20. So using a legal row operation, we change the 0.4 into a 0. Now, just as an observation, this is the final matrix. So the question just asked you to get this far. It didn't ask you to make any observation. But if you notice, this one is solved to the end. Notice that top row is saying that x is 10. And the middle row says y is negative 14. And the bottom row says z is 20. So you do happen to have the solution, too.